I'm Julian Minnesone. The Titans have a lot of needs, but how early should they take a receiver? We'll talk about that sense of urgency next here on the Titans Squad Show.
I'm Tyler Rowland, and did the Titans general manager tip the pick at the owners' meetings? Not so fast.
And I'm Brad Hopkins. It's time for the Titans to roll out the big guns.
Tighten up. It's the Titans Squad. Everything Tennessee Titans every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titans Squad Show starts now.
And welcome to the Titans Squad Show. As you heard off the top, I'm Julian Minnesone. That's Tyler Rowland, and that's the much buffer Brad Hopkins over there. Man, my girl watches this show, man. Chill.
I just left the gym. I just left for a walk, guys. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to shower up and get changed. So you don't want to be in my office right now anyway.
Well, we are going to talk about a lot of the Titans' strengths and maybe weaknesses coming up here on the Titans Squad Show today. We're going to talk about John Franklin Myers, his impact on the defense, and do the Titans really need to add another pass rusher? How comfortable we are with that, and the offensive line, the sense of urgency there after Mike Borgonzi's comments here at the league meetings this week. We're also going to talk about the need for wide receiver as well. But I wanted to start with some of Mike Borgonzi's comments, fellas, here. He spoke to reporters in Arizona at the league meetings and said one of the big things was they still want to take the best player available at number 4 overall. What did you make of those comments? And does that glean any insight to who the Titans may be taking here in the first round coming up at the end of April?
I got to tell you, I think it's kind of funny how people weaponize that comment. They're like, oh, best player available. They said they're going to take. That means that he's talking about my guy. He's talking about Jeremiyah. He's talking about David Bailey. He's talking about Ruben Bain. Whoever you like and want the Titans to pick at number 4, you're going to use that comment as your weapon in battle to say that he's talking about your guy. So I find it ironic that happens. You know, the majority of people want Jeremiyah Love. So most of what you see out there is, oh, he's talking about Jeremiyah Love. He's saying premium position value. It doesn't matter. He's taking the best player. It's got to be Jeremiyah Love. And I want to at least acknowledge that there's a world where Jeremiyah Love is not the top player on their board, where maybe David Bailey, who's that perfect wide 9 edge with speed and power coming off that Robert Saleh likes and would typically draft, like maybe he's their best player. Ruben Bain was a dominant defensive force. Maybe he's their best player on their board. So we don't know what the Titans board is. No one actually knows. You can hear reports and rumors and all of that, but using Mike Borgonzi's comment right there to be like, oh, we know for sure who they're picking now, because I don't care who you like or who you think it was about. You don't know that. He played it perfectly. Smokescreen season, say nothing while saying something. That's exactly what he did. So I think that first and foremost, before we talk about what that could mean, we don't actually know what they didn't actually tip the pick. He's not that dumb.
So let's just run through the list of consensus top 10s and see if we all agree. Jeremiyah Love, Fernando Mendoza, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, David Bailey, Francis Manoa, Sonny Styles, Carnell Tate, Ruben Bain Jr., and Jordan Tyson. Will we not agree that those are consensus top 10 picks, right?
I mean, some of the fringe guys, but yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So you can go through that list and start checking off players that we're not even going to take a flyer on. At this point, we're not going to take Francis Manoa. He's a tackle. Admittedly, we need some help, I think, but they're not going to do him. Fernando Mendoza, off the radar. Caleb Downs, great pick. David Bailey, we can go down the list, right? To me, there's only a handful of guys that will be classified or qualified to say best available, especially at number 4, because we don't have to have all 10 of those. We just have to have 4 of them, right? So with that thinking, come on, man. He didn't say it, but I think that maybe for those of us that are now warming up to the fact that they would take a running back and not necessarily an edge rusher, which I think most people were wanting to in the very early on of this process, were wanting to address. Because I know that in my mock drafts, I had David Bailey coming to us at number 4, period, point blank.
And I finally warmed up to it, Brad. I finally came over to your side where I'm like, you know what? They're probably going to take David Bailey, and now you're leaving me to go to Love Island.
Yeah, see, that's what happened. Well, what happened was I was thinking that we need to start addressing need first, right? But then you start thinking about the availability of arguably the best, if not one of the best, players regardless of position in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's available at number 4, because we know the Las Vegas Raiders aren't taking a running back. We know that the Jets aren't taking a running back because of their love for Breece Hall. Arizona has bigger fish to fry than trying to take a running back. They signed Tyler Algier. They brought back James Conner. So, they're probably out of the running back conversation, which leaves Jeremiyah Love to sit at number 4. And I think that that's kind of what he's saying. It's like, don't be shocked when we bring in the successor to all the great running backs that we've had in this program. So he didn't tip his hand per se, but to me, he kind of stated the obvious.
B-Hop, you mentioned tip his hand. Did maybe Mike Borgonzi tip his hand that they're not trading down now?
Now, see, that's another thing. And so, you guys know I'm on Sirius on Sunday mornings, and Bill Lekis and we've been doing our mock drafts since February, right? And he said, I have a trade this week in my mock draft. And I said, if you have somebody jumping the Titans, if you have Arizona trading with, say, the Commanders to take Jeremiyah Love at number 3, I'm going to punch you right in the face. I told him that. But the thing is, he did have a trade this week, and it was the Commanders trading with us. So this is the thing. Would I trade possibly getting Jeremiyah Love for getting whichever edge rusher is available who we want to have, who, in the very beginning of this conversation I was having, plus maybe next year having 2 second-round picks? You know what I'm saying? Because of you trading down to 7 from 4 and then having some more draft equity, that might be palatable. You know what I mean? I might take the edge rusher that Tyler and I were talking about getting in the very beginning, David Bailey or Reuben Bain, whoever that guy is that's available that hadn't been taken already, and then having a really good draft situation early draft next year. That might make moving on from Jeremiyah Love okay. That's about the only way that I would say that I would support it.
Tyler,
Brad,
you also had a trade back in one of your episodes. Yes.
Julian, you're 100% right. I can't believe you're about to throw me up with the softball. I got to trust in it there. But my mock draft I did this week as well, Brad, had a trade down. I'll be honest with you, though. I think there's a chance the Titans could trade down and get Jeremiyah Love because I think the Commanders could come up for Sonny Styles, the linebacker. I think that there's some connective tissue there, and their GM was talking about Sonny Styles. So I think that there's even a chance the Titans could fall back. And, yeah, I'd love one of the edge rushers, Reuben Bain or David Bailey. But I'd also, after a trade back, be comfortable with Jeremiyah Love. I'd be comfortable with Mansour Delane. I'd be comfortable with Carnell Tate. I'm not somebody who would take Carnell Tate at 4, but if the Titans were to trade back and get Carnell Tate, that would be a godsend, that eliminates so much risk. So I think there's a lot of options there. I think that's truly onto something. It's just about whether Washington is willing to make a move up when they don't have a lot of draft capital. But I kind of think they might be willing to do it if they just accept their fate and know that they're plugging holes and they get Brandon Ayuk to help at wide receiver. They could do a lot with that. So I think it's on the table, and that would make a lot of sense.
Tyler, you mentioned Carnell Tate, and I think the interesting thing about the receiver position is it's one of need for the Titans. Obviously, they are going to have some young players with Chimere Dike, Alec Eilmanner. You got Calvin Ridley on a restructured deal, and of course, you signed Wan'Dale Robinson. But this team is still in need of a number 1 target weapon for Cam Ward. Are we overlooking the receiver position just because the heat around the Jeremiyah Love talk is obviously increasing, and edge has been the talk from the beginning? Are we overlooking the receivers in this draft potentially that early?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that wide receiver is a need, but at number 4, I just don't think that there's a wide receiver that can fit that bill. So if they trade back, they brought Mekhi Lemon in, they brought Casey Concepcion in, for 30 visits. If they trade back a little bit, if they move back at all and get additional draft capital, all bets are off at that point. Like if they took, if they trade back to 10 or 11 and took a Casey Concepcion or a Mekhi Lemon or took Jordan Tyson there or something like that. Again, if they trade back to 6 or 7 or 8 and take Carnell Tate, I can't be mad about that. At 4, it's a bit too risky. But again, the calculation isn't just the player. That's why you can take a wide receiver or something like that a little earlier than I think maybe they should go, because it's not just the player that you're getting, it's player plus additional draft capital from a move back. And that changes the risk factor. That changes the calculation a bit. So yeah, if they move back whatsoever, different players make a lot of sense, honestly, because that wide receiver plus draft capital, let's do it.
Who would you rather, Julian? Wan'Dale Robinson at slot or Mekhi Lemon?
Probably Wan'Dale Robinson, just because of the familiarity with Brian Dable, vet, been in the league before. So yeah, I guess
Relatively
that's
young.
still
5 years
relatively
in.
young. Yeah.
Why would you waste the number 4 pick on arguably the best slot receiver available? I mean, I think you'd have to look to Carnell, maybe Jordan, as far as the Z of the X, but somebody that's inside, the guy that has punt return ability, the shifty kind of guy. I mean, not the dude, the burner that's going to take the field vertically. Just somebody that, I just wouldn't want to put that against, if I was Mekhi, I'd be like, man, they're already stacked where I'm at. You know what I mean? So I'd have to fight my way to get into it. And then there's that expectation, yada, yada, yada. So I just, at this point, I wouldn't be an advocate for grabbing a receiver at number 4. Maybe if like Tyler's talking about, you move down, to, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't say outside of the top 10, because the only reason I'm moving outside of the top 10 is if I got 2 firsts next year. You know what I mean? My own and yours. You know what I mean? That'd be the only way I would entertain that idea. But I think that there are more pressing needs than receiver in the first round. Not saying that receiver doesn't need to be addressed, just not with the 4th pick.
Yeah. And there are, as we've talked about on this show multiple times, there are value picks at receiver, second round, if you wanted to take it at 35 or at 66 overall. You can find some of that. I mean, B-Hop, we just did a mock draft this past Friday where you had Denzel Boston at 35 in that slot. Chris Bell, somebody like him, Jacoby Lane. Those have all fallen in mock drafts in kind of that second or third round area where the Titans could certainly address those needs. Let me ask you this, guys. Do you think that edge, if Mike Borgonzi thinks that one of the edge guys is their best player available, knowing that you have Jermaine Johnson there, and then of course the interior guys, JFM and Jeff Simmons, does that shoot up your radar even more so than a Jeremiyah Love, just because of the sense of who you have on that side of the ball, and knowing that Robert Saleh is a defensive first coach?
Honestly, I think most of that conversation is financial. It's the best edge rushers in the NFL make $30 to $40 million. So if you get a David Bailey and he gives you, 12 to 14 sacks a year, that's worth about $35 million. And his rookie contract, he's going to get about $8-9 million per year. So now, that's a big time discount. We're talking about, $26 million a year discount. If Jeremiyah Love is really, really good, the best running backs in the NFL get about $15 million a year. Well, he's going to be making $8-9 million out of the gate and have the most guaranteed money on his contract of any running back in the NFL the moment he's drafted because of the way rookie deals. So you're getting a not as good discount there. So what's it really worth? Now, you could say, I don't think David Bailey's going to be a 14, 12 sack guy a year. I don't believe that. If you want to say you don't believe in the player, then you don't believe in the player. But if I just told you that Jeremiyah Love became one of the top 5 running backs in the NFL and David Bailey had 12 to 14 sacks a season, you would be getting a way bigger discount on David Bailey's production than the discount that you get for having a running back. So that is an essential part to the conversation that just most people don't want to talk about, because you're talking about money and cap percentage and what the contract looks like after the first 4 years. And there's so many variables for that to actually matter. But I think that's the edge versus Jeremiyah Love conversation is, do you want a 50-cent discount on an apple or a $10 discount on a steak? What's more valuable? What's the better value on that? Apples are still good. The best apple is great. You know what I mean? But it's about how much value you're getting on a contract. And that's why the edge conversation can't go away and won't go away. Because Mike Borgonzi came from a franchise where they didn't spend on running back very much. Now they just did with Ken Walker, but the money and how, when people say positional value, it's really about the money that you get. And I think that's a big part of this calculus at the end of the day. It goes more than just the player's talents.
Yeah, to Tyler's point, unlike JFM's contract, which is 3 years, they only brought Jermaine on for a year. So that says that that's a temporary. That's not the crown. You know what I'm saying? Sure. That thing's in there just to keep the nerves from getting affected until they actually get the crown in there, right? Using that analogy because my wife just had a crown, and her temporary fell out while we're eating. So that's just a filler in essence. Now, Jermaine Johnson could go in there and have a hell of a year and be afforded another opportunity to extend that contract, right? But I think that contract itself right now says, hey, look, we're going to address edge with a young player that we feel is affordable for us, and hopefully we can get some good minutes out of that cat. You know what I mean? If we draft someone in the first or second round at edge and they outperform Jermaine Johnson, yay us. You know what I mean? Then what we've spent on Jermaine isn't going to cost us a whole bunch, and then we can just go ahead and keep riding out with what we've got to this point. And maybe if you want to offer another club-friendly deal to Jermaine next year to back up said edge rusher, that could be in play as well. But I think that, like you said, Tyler, the numbers, the money is probably the motivator in what they can actually get in a guy that's going to be faced with the rookie cap for the next 4 years, versus what they've addressed so far in free agency at that position.
Julian, I don't know if you want to save it for the JFM Big Jeff conversation because that's D-line adjacent, but I think the Jermaine Johnson, Femi Oladejo pecking order at edge informs a lot of why I think edge is their preference right now. I think they'd take David Bailey over Jeremiyah Love. I do. That's what I believe. If I'm wrong, I'll be wrong. But I think with those players on the board, they take David Bailey. And a big part of that conversation isn't just the money that we just talked about, but also what they have on the depth chart right now. And I think a fundamental misunderstanding of the edge depth chart by a lot of people who like the Titans. Like, people are, in my opinion, are just misreading the edge depth chart. So we could talk about that when we get to the D-line conversation. But Brad, I think you're walking down a path that continues to lead us to David Bailey and an edge rusher, even if people are so, stuck in love. People have fallen in love.
What I will say to round out this segment is what, back to Tyler, your point at the start of the show, that we don't know what Mike Borgonzi's board is. He says he wants the best player available. If he, for some reason, thought Sonny Styles is the best player available, he's going to take him despite, the need or, the athletic ability of Jeremiyah Love or any of the edges or what have you. So just wanted to keep that in mind for fans listening. Just because he says best player available doesn't necessarily mean it's the consensus among the NFL pundits that it's Jeremiyah Love, right, point blank period. So we're going to talk about more of the Titans, these specifically O-line, because Mike Borgonzi also addressed that at the league meetings this week. We'll talk about that next year on the Titans Squad Show. Keep it here. All right. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission, merchant, and swap firm. All right, fellas, so Mike Borgonzi also addressed the offensive line. I know Brad is chomping at the bit to talk about the O-line this week and said that there's going to be some competition on the interior. Obviously, center is a huge position of need after letting Lloyd Cushenberry go. They signed Austin Schlottman. They also signed Cordell Volson as some guard depth piece. And then, of course, they have Jackson Slater. And I see Tyler's eyes already, the sign of concern on his face there. But Mike Borgonzi also said that, hey, there's going to be some competition, and there's also day 2 and day 3 of the draft to address these positions. How urgent is that offensive line position, and how early would you take an offensive lineman in this upcoming draft? B-Hop, we'll start with you.
So, to me, number 66 totally makes sense because, well, one, Dan Moore's under contract till 2028. His cap hit will be $26 million heading into this season. Number 35 adds a bit more expectation, basically to crack the starting lineup. Now, they could get a bit more explosive on the outside with that pick, but, we'll see. A third-round pick adds the necessary depth and potentially Dan's replacement if he doesn't keep showing improvement. And I put that in there for a reason. It wasn't like all last season he struggled, but there was a lot of times that you looked at the guy and say, they spent all that money on that. You know what I mean? They bought in Austin Decklis and, from the Chargers, and,
Yeah.
he played for a few other teams. But if you look at his PFF grades, man, they're kind of embarrassing, just being honest. And that's despite having 5 starts last year. So that pick also gives them room for development over the next couple of seasons. If you take somebody at 3rd versus somebody, earlier than that, so I wouldn't expect the Titans to take a flyer on any of these guys just because of their current roster situation. I know that somebody in the comments said our tackles are shaky. JC, I think, is giving him a little bit more autonomy because he is a lot younger player that had moved positions last year, showed some improvement, and has shown incremental improvements throughout the season. And I would expect him to get even better. But I'm still going to be out to lunch on Dan to see if, in fact, he can keep that position over the next 3 seasons that we have him. I'm just not impressed. So they might end up drafting his replacement, if not this year, next year, given what 2026 looks like. But I do think that basically that 3rd pick, number 66, would probably be the optimum position to take a tackle, because then you wouldn't expect him to be thrust into the lineup. He'd have to earn his way into the lineup. And it's still quality enough pick to get a good player that you can develop over time.
Brad, we really are ships passing in the night on this episode. Like, in my last mock draft, I took a tackle at 35. I did. Max Anacore was there, the guy from Arizona State, the developing good athlete. I think we talked about wide receiver, and I honestly have to acknowledge I think I was wrong. I think the way that the wide receiver group played out, I don't think there's great value there at 35 anymore like I did originally, because I think the top guys, Tyson, Tate, Lemon, Conception, Omar Cooper, Denzel Boston, that group right there, which I think is the top guys, I honestly think they'll all be gone in the first round. I don't know that one of those dudes will be there at 35. And I think that, the Chris Brazzell, Chris Bell, Jeremy Bernard, the next wave of guys, I don't know if that's worth it at 35. And I look at tackle, and I wonder if an Ian Akor or a Blake Miller out of Clemson, maybe a Caleb Lumu is there. And I'm like, would it actually be smart to take an offensive tackle with the 2nd round pick? And especially if they were to move down and get an additional 3rd or anything like that, they drop back 5 or 6 picks and one of those tackles is there. I mean, Dan Moore's contract after this season, they could cut him. It would be $12 million in dead money, but like 9 point change in savings, which is, you're only losing $2 million in value on something like that. I think this might actually, the 2nd round might be a time to take a tackle if those tackles fall down just a little bit. They may not, it depends on, like, if Monroe Freeling goes super early after and Malinoa goes 3rd, they might be in trouble. That might not come to, but then maybe the wide receivers fall a little bit. So I honestly have come around to where I think the value at interior offensive line is 3rd to the 5th round. And I think Mike Borgonzi said something like that. We could talk about those options next. But at 35, if the right offensive tackle is there, it's such a premium position, and Dan Moore is so shaky. And J.C. Latham played better in the second half, but he has not earned the right to be like, oh, yeah, he was a hit in the first round. Like, he's still on the fence. Even the most optimistic Titans fan has to admit that. So I don't think it would be crazy to go offensive tackle at 35. And with the way I could see the board playing out, I think that could be a real possibility.
Dan Moore is on a 4-year, $82 million contract, and I want to acknowledge to everybody, yeah, Brad shaking his head already, that part of that, he was available for a reason, as Brad has said multiple times on this show. And also, there is a bad team tax with a position of need that the Titans were so desperately, they just had a hole there. They needed to overpay for somebody like a Dan Moore just because they needed to fill that spot. Now, I want to ask, when it comes to center and right guard, Tyler, you mentioned kind of rounds 3 through 5. Is that where you see that position getting shored up? Because also Jackson Slater is still in the mix too for competing for maybe that right guard spot.
I mean, they're just going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks at the interior offensive line. It's too late in the process for them to have some sort of plan that, oh, wow, they figured it out, like short of bringing Kevin Zeitler back at right guard, at some point they're going to have some combination of interior offensive line at center and right guard that we're not 100% sold on. And they just got to hope that all the resources they throw at it, they're taking a bunch of $1 bills and going to try to find a bunch of different shirts at thrift stores and see which one fits. They're not going into the high-end store and buying the $70 shirt that they got to wear, so that's what they're going to do, and maybe they find some good options doing it that way. But yeah, I think the mid rounds, starting at 66, going to probably 142, I think they could find a starting interior offensive lineman. And we talked about value earlier, like the value of a running back versus an edge rusher. Interior offensive line historically has been something where a lot of teams say we're not taking it in the first round, we're not overpaying for guards and centers. Like tackle is where the money is at. Brad, he knows about the value of the offensive tackle. So I think the Titans may, with Packers roots and Chiefs roots, look at this in an old school way and say, hey, good interior offensive linemen can be found with lesser resources than other positions. And you can't find good edge rushers and wide receivers and quarterbacks and tackles too late. It's an anomaly. But, linebackers and safeties and cornerbacks and, interior offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, you can find good players later in the draft. So I think there's a lot of value in there with a multitude of different names that we can all roll through. But center and guard, there are really good options this year in those mid rounds, so it matches up perfectly.
I do have one center going in my draft in the first round, and that's Connor Lew. I think that's a guy that somebody's going to find some value in. But when you look at Volson, not so much. You got no reps in 2025.
No.
Jackson Slater, similar situation. Now Austin Slotman, he's got some pretty good grades. I mean, this guy's seen some fire. He's been in the fight, and also he was on that roster last year with Brian Daboll, so he kind of understands exactly what Brian's offense is going to look like. So there is some value there, not only with ability, but just familiarity with what the expectation is. But I do expect them to address interior offensive linemen at 66, no later than that. You know what I mean? Right in that middle round, like you talk about, maybe even sooner than that. I wouldn't want them to take number 35 and use a lineman for that, but especially an interior guy. But
no way.
They definitely need to get after that position, because that's something that's going to be need to be addressed if they need to have some success. Because if you think about it, the interior of the offensive line is where the run game starts, right? You want your best run blockers to be those big uglies that are in the middle there that can just carve out holes. You know what I mean? Outside guys are more pass protectors because, the space is where the mismatches, disadvantages can come with speed and that kind of thing. But when you look on the inside, man, that's the foundation of your offensive line. And if they're questionable, if they're shaky, can you imagine guys just blowing through the A-gap constantly or not getting good run fits and just being a liability? It's a bad deal then, because then the run game's gone. Now you're forced to pass, putting more pressure on the outside. It's just you got to get those guys shorn up sooner than later.
Brad, you're giving me nightmares right now. Like that's what I see when I see. I did film review on Austin Schlottman. Yeah, he's not terrible, but he doesn't do anything great either. You know what I mean? Right. There's a reason he's been a backup. He's the new Corey Levin. And we all think Corey Levin is a very solid player who deserves a job in the NFL, but is he a starting level player? I don't know if he can do that for 17 games. Cordell Volson, I'm from Ohio, man. I'm in the jungle. I'm surrounded by Bengals fans. I hear all of the things that these Bengals people and smart Bengals fans are saying. Cordell Volson is not a starting player. Like, we're going to be in trouble. You know what I mean? Right. So I'm like looking at Austin Schlottman, Cordell Volson, Jackson Slater. And Slater, again, it's like Femi Oladejo when people count him in the conversation. Like, we can't know that. There's no way that anybody knows for sure that Jackson Slater, he played one game last year of full amounts, like literally one game of full snaps. You can't look at him and be like, yeah, Cam Ward will be good to go. Like, what they've done on the interior offensive line right now, it is nightmarish. Like, it's terrifying, quite honestly, how much worse the offensive line is right now than it even was last year when it started having some semblance of respectability. So, Yeah, they must have some sort of plan where they really are going to attack it in the mid rounds. I think if they were to trade back in the second round again and get an extra third round pick, they could almost do what they did last year where they went DK, Helm, Io Manor, just like, we're just throwing resources at it. Something's going to work. I could see them going tackle, guard, center, like rapidly with some of those picks in the third round, top 100 style, 101 added in there, just to like be like, hey, we're going to get 3 guys and add them to our group and it's going to work out some way or another. You know what I mean? Like that has to be the plan.
Yeah, that's.
I would only hope that real quick, Julian. I would only hope that. I mean, like you just mentioned, Tyler, their 4th round success on the offensive side of the football.
Sure.
If they can have that kind of impression with 3rd, 4th round picks and offensive linemen, they definitely need that. And honestly, this is a serious question. How the hell did Tony Pollard rush for 1,000 yards last year behind one of the most inept running games in the league? How did he do that?
Yeah. 4 straight years of that. That's why I'm not worried about that necessarily. I'm worried about Cam Ward because the dude stayed relatively healthy up until the very last game of the season. And I don't want to put any bad juju in the air, but you play around with the offensive line. Cam Ward, is going to be vulnerable in more games than not. And so addressing that obviously is a huge concern. And it also makes me think, fellas, outside of Robert Saleh and maybe Brian Dable, Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, he's probably the most important coach that they have on the staff for at least this upcoming season to develop that young offensive line. So, all right. Next on the Titans Squad Show, we are going to talk about the defensive front. John Franklin Myers, also the importance of edge. Tyler teased the conversation earlier when it comes to the edge depth chart with Jermaine Johnson and, of course, Femi Oladejo. That's next here in the Titans Squad Show. Keep it. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with Tyler and other listeners of this show. Just tap the link in the show notes or go to the link you see on your screen right there if you're with us on YouTube, lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Once again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. All right, fellas. So a couple weeks ago, it was a couple shows ago, we talked about some of the free agent signings and who was our most important at the top of the list. And originally I had said Alontae Taylor, but I think I'm changing the tune to the John Franklin Myers just because of how important that interior defensive line, and that's going to be the pass rush, and also what he does for Jeffery Simmons. Let me ask you guys this. Is there a chance that Big Jeff and JFM could be a top 3 duo, interior or defensive line duo, in the NFL this coming season? Because we saw how important that was for the Seattle Seahawks with their guys, Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy.
For sure. So John Franklin Myers was 3rd on the Broncos in sacks, just a half a sack behind Jonathan Cooper with 7.5. Obviously, Nick Bonito was the man last year with 14 sacks. JFM would have easily been 2nd in sacks for the Titans last year behind Big Jeff, who had 11. Life of an interior D lineman is occupying the line, so everybody else makes the tackle. So he didn't stand out in that category, but filling those gaps and stuffing the run is what he's really, really good at. He and Jeffrey make everything bounce outside. They would to the waiting arms of Jermaine Johnson and a draft pick if that's where the Titans decide to go with that. Comparables, Chris Jones and Derek Nottie, Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Those are some of the elite groups that you'd have to compare them with. And, with the potential, they could be having that kind of success. And I don't know that it would necessarily directly point to those two being the reason, the catalyst for them being such a really good defensive front. But I tell you what, it certainly wouldn't hurt. And I'm kind of excited to see exactly what that's going to look like, especially for a guy that has been so effective on a really good defense, and like JFM was. Jeffrey, he already has shown this is his defense. Hell, this is his team to this point until somebody else steps up. So I think that any addition with quality would automatically at least raise some eyebrows and a level of intrigue that would broach that conversation realistically. So I'm not going to say that, they'll be the best dynamic duo in the league, but they definitely will be amongst the conversation for sure.
What I'm so excited about is how well they both pull off twists and stunts. Like when it's their job to be the screener, you know what I mean? I use a basketball term there, but like when, you know, there's a stunt up front and John Franklin Myers is coming from the left and he's going, I have this rep on film where he was against the Jags and he just decleated the Jaguar center because it was his job to pick so that the other interior lineman could loop around him and go off his backside through the gap. You know what I mean? And that's how they want to set it up. And the way that Big Jeff does that, and then the way that John Franklin Myers does that, they are just going to decleat interior offensive linemen who don't see them coming. And then the other guy is, that's the elite thing about John Franklin Myers is he is so freaking athletic for a guy his size. He moves, you know, it's a dancing bear. As I say, it's like a polar bear on roller skates, the way that he's able to move around at that size. And him and Jeffery Simmons both kind of have that quality, which is why they dominate on the interior so much because they're too strong for some of these offensive tackles, but they're too quick for the interior offensive linemen. So those two together at the same time, I mean, Brad mentioned it. Big Jeff had the most sacks by an interior defensive lineman, and John Franklin Myers had the third most. So, of course, you put that together, they could be the best duo in the league. And honestly, with the money that the Titans are spending, the moves that they made, they're betting it all on the D-line, which is what Robert Saleh football teams do anyways. So they need it to be.
Yeah, I just think of Jeff Simmons with the 11 sacks, B-Hop, and what he could do. He had no help, and he had 11 sacks this season, which is career high. Go ahead.
I just got scared, guys. I just got scared because of what our offense is going to face every single day in practice. Volson and Schlottman are going to get their asses kicked every day. Every stinking day.
Yeah.
How's that going to make us better? You remember when Jeffery Simmons first came in? I'm not going to say first came in, but when he was getting after the defensive line, offensive line, talking about, they can't block me. They can't block me. He's going to be saying that ad nauseum every single practice. And how much are they going to be able to get done? Are they going to, is Robert going to have to go over there and tap Jeff on the shoulder and JFM on the shoulder and say, hey, y'all, just take it down a notch. We need to get this play off. They need to be able to see the speed of what they're trying to do. And you being standing next to Cam Ward every single snap is not going to help us. So just take it down a notch. You see what I'm saying? Because I know iron sharpens iron. Put it this way. With what those two interior linemen, what those interior offensive linemen are going to be faced with, they should be the sharpest sword ever because of how they're going to be matched up every single day. And hopefully that makes them better. I understand that. But I'm just trying to think of what we can get out of practice on a regular basis, as disruptive as those guys are going to be on a regular, every single day down type situation. I think there might be more frustration from Jeffrey and JFM to say, hey, look, guys, we need some people in here that can block us. Now, arguably, we might be a couple of the best interior defensive linemen in the game, and it sucks for you. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to get some things done offensively. And if we don't have the timing and all the things that we need to have done during the week, we're going to be almost ineffective on Sunday. So that's going to be an issue for these guys, especially when camp starts and they put the shoulder pads on and it really starts getting live. I mean, man, it could be a frustrating deal.
Tyler, you teased the conversation we had earlier when it comes to the edge position with Jermaine Johnson and Femi Oladejo. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot when people say we don't need an edge. I've had a lot of people, Jeremiyah, the love stands saying, we don't need an edge. They traded for an edge. They signed a couple edges. They don't need an edge. And I'm just looking at the edge rusher position and I'm like, not so fast. I think it's a misunderstanding of who's going to do what and what the rules are and how a Robert Saleh defense works. A lot of people just look at the starting lineup. Is the starting lineup filled? If not, we need to draft here and here and here to fill the starting lineup. And listen, you do need to have a starting lineup. But the reality is football rosters are built in year cycles, like 2-3 years ahead. You don't just look at, I have to fill my team this year and who cares about backups and who cares about roles, and that's not complex enough for how these rosters are actually built. And Jermaine Johnson is a 6'5" long arm power edge. He's like a Bud Dupree style player. He's never been the TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Brian Burns. Even his good year that everybody gets excited about was 7.5 sacks in 2023, his second season before the Achilles. You don't know if the Achilles is going to ever come back. That's, the new ACL, where people never came back from ACLs when I was a kid. Now they come back from ACLs all the time. You don't come back as well off the Achilles. That's the new ACL from when I was a kid. And we don't know if he's ever going to get that form back. And even if he does, it was 7.5 sacks and a lot of cleanup sacks and effort because his motor runs nonstop. And it's not like he's boom, boom, beating the tackle with handwork and getting straight to the quarterback like a freak. He's just motor and effort and staying after it. And other guys are creating pressure like John Franklin Myers, you know what I mean? And
sure,
he's benefiting off of that. It's like Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree was a cleanup sack artist, and the Titans decided to pay him $18.5 million a year. I thought that was so dumb. He was the fourth best rusher. But that's the point. Jermaine Johnson is like the fourth best rusher on your group, and he cleans up because he plays with effort and strength and power and pushes the puck. He's not the winner. He's not the guy who beats the offensive tackle within 2 seconds and is on the quarterback. That's the speed rusher, and the Titans don't have that because Femi Oladipo is a Jermaine Johnson guy. Jermaine Johnson's on a 1-year deal like Brad Hopkins pointed out earlier, and that's a great opportunity for Femi to learn from Jermaine Johnson. And then Femi supplants Jermaine Johnson in 2027, and he's the starting edge rusher right there, and Jermaine comes back on a team-friendly deal and plays in a rotational role. And then who's the speed guy? We have Jacob Martin. He's 30 years old. He had 5.5 sacks last year. That's not a starting speed rusher. So if you add a David Bailey in there, or maybe they like Reuben Bain to do that, you add that guy in there, now you have 4 edges, not just 2. It's not just about your starters. You have Femi and Jermaine who can rotate, start on early downs against the run. And then you have David Bailey and Jacob Martin who can rotate as the speed rusher and get after the quarterback like that. The roles of these guys, what they do well, what they're going to do in the future, and what is still missing is so obvious to me. And I just wish people would look at the bigger picture rather than just, we have a starter, we grabbed 3 guys. Most of these guys are practice squad guys other than Martin and Johnson's on a 1-year deal. It's pretty obvious if you just look at it for 2026 and 2027 for 1 second, it becomes blatantly obvious how big of a need edge rusher still is.
The good news for the Titans when it comes to at least Jermaine Johnson is that they are getting him the year after the year from the injury. So if there was a time that he could be productive, it is at least that. Now, let me ask you this. We've talked about value this entire episode. If the Titans pass on an edge at 4, do you like the value of an edge at 35, whether it be Zion Young or Cassius Howell or Gabe Jockus, somebody like that?
Yeah, you're still talking about a player at that position that's ranked in the top 10. You know what I mean? By position. So that means you're getting somebody that's had a good collegiate season. And if you plug them into what we already have as assets to be freed up to do what they do, especially with the interior of this defensive line already being established, then like you said, it would be easier for a guy like that with those kind of credentials to step in. It's not like you're getting some slouch. You know what I mean? This isn't a 5th round pick we're talking about, or someone that's not even in the top 15 or top 20 by position. With 35, you're still getting a monster. You know what I mean? Because it's not going to be 32 defensive linemen they're taking in the draft. There's going to be a handful of them left over to get picked up in that second round, which is early in the second round, which is where the Titans sit.
And I think it's a perfect value, too. We talked about, I don't know if the value will be there at wide receiver, but it might be there at offensive tackle. I think it'll be there at edge, especially for the kind of edge. Again, a speed rusher who can win quickly against an offensive tackle. R. Mason Thomas is that kind of undersized speed guy. Cassius Howell is an undersized speed guy. Romello Height, same sort of thing. I think a guy like Joshua Josephs, maybe a little bit later on if the Titans were to trade down in the second from Tennessee, is a guy who can fill that void as well. I think that Zion Young, Derek Moore, those are bigger guys, bigger, stronger guys. I don't know if they fill that kind of need that I'm talking about, but at that value, they could still be in play too, because again, the way people look at Jermaine Johnson is a little tainted, in my opinion, what the expectation is for him. So if they went out and got another big edge, I wouldn't be shocked by that either, but I think there is the chance that there's great value at edge at 35. So I wouldn't be shocked to see an edge there if they go Jeremiyah Love at 4, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely, and we've all of us have done mock drafts on these respective shows, not just the Titan Squad show, but Tyler's show, Locked On Titans, and I urge you to check those out here on our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We wanted to get your questions in the show. We're going to do our best to answer them and address some of the comments that we've been talking about, some of the needs the Titans have and what they should do at certain positions. That's next in our Titans Talk segment here on the Titan Squad show. Keep it here. All right, fellas. So the chat is actually popping off here because there's a lot of arguments going on what the Titans need, what the Titans don't need. Somebody was talking about offensive line at 4, and there's somebody said here, Samuel Roland Mills 1472 says, if we talk offensive line at 4, I will fly to Nashville and beat Borgonzi with his own arm. That's funny. So let me try to see some of the comments because there have been a ton. Here we go. JFK 5149. At what point are you going to get help? Are you going to help Cam Ward? I think he meant to say SMH instead of SMG. But that could mean a lot of things, guys. That could mean receiver. That could mean offensive line. I think for us here on the show, we talked about the help would come up front rather than on the outside.
Well, I just think it's funny that helping Cam Ward is only the first pick. You can only help Cam Ward with the first-round pick. If they went defense with the first-round pick and all offense the rest of the draft, people would still be saying in the chat they're not helping Cam Ward. So it's like you can help Cam Ward in different ways than just with the first-round pick.
I think that honestly, we have not really addressed what Jeremiyah Love is, not who Jeremiyah Love is, but what he is. He's more than a running back, fellas. He's a guy that is very, very versatile. Obviously, we know he's established coming out of the backfield, but the guy's going to give you 50, 60 catches during the season. He's going to be somebody that's used a lot often, like the players that Robert Saleh has dealt with, like the player that Brian Daboll had in his offense before they shipped his butt off to Philadelphia and watched him win a championship. And that's the type of player I think that adds the kind of flexibility and options that keeps defenses guessing. You know what I mean? So you're not just getting a running back or arguably one of the top 5 best prospects, regardless of position. You're getting a multifaceted player that does just what the question is asking. At what point are we going to help Cam Ward? You're helping Cam Ward by giving him a Swiss Army knife. You're helping Cam Ward by giving him some weapons that you don't even necessarily see. You know what I mean? You walked up to that guy with your fist balled up and you're ready to fight him. You didn't realize he had a switchblade in his back pocket. You're in trouble. You know what I mean? So while you're throwing fists, he's dicing you up. You know what I mean? Not only popping you with the fist, but cutting you to boot. So I think that those are some of the things that we need to look at as far as the versatility of this one player doing different things.
And Addison Turner 9152 adds to that. I can't help but join in on the love train. Sounds better and better every day. Give a guy who will be a top 15 talent with top 3 upside. I know B-Hop's doing the love dance. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
If they don't market that, they're dumb. They need to hire all of the marketing people. If we draft Jeremiyah Love and they don't come out with some, getting on the love train, stop it. It should be on the Jumbotron every time this guy sees the field.
What did you say, Tyler? All is fair in love and Ward?
All is fair in love and Ward. Also, wouldn't it be so great? Imagine Jeremiyah Love breaking off a 60-yard run. He does the little heart symbol that he does because his name's Love, and he's boom, and he breaks it because it's a heartbreaking run. The heartbreaker, you know what I mean?
That's
like at the end of the game, he broke the heart of the opponent. It's over. Listen, all this stuff we're talking about, we cannot ignore this factor. It would just make the team more fun. It would make them more exciting. They would get talked about more. When you're at your fantasy draft and someone takes Jeremiyah Love, they're like, man, he's nasty, man. And you're like, yeah, you're a Titans fan. You're like, yeah, he's sick. You know what I mean? Like the running back legacy of the Titans, all of it. It's hard to ignore those emotional pulls. And that's why against my long-standing judgment of being against running back in the first round, especially at pick number 4, I can't help but if they take him, I'll be happy. Because there's just so much emotional to play. And I'm sorry, but people who just say, I'm a fan and all you do is watch 3 hours on Sunday and whether they win or lose is all that matters. Like, that's not being a fan. to me. Like the conversations, being at the bar and talking about your favorite team, and the online and seeing a segment from a national show that's hyping up the Titans and putting a spotlight on their players and being like, I'm a fan of that team. Like that emotional side of being a fan is what makes being a fan so fun, not just the game itself. So like, you can't ignore that. Would be great. And for business purposes, if you're the Titans, need to fill the stadium, get your fans back energized. It's hard to ignore those parts.
You know what made Derrick Henry vulnerable was them being inept up front. You know what I mean? It made it easier to pass on Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry, he couldn't get going because of all the problems that were going on up front. And I'd hate to see that repeat itself with such a good prospect. You know what I mean? Because think about that. We can put, Derrick Henry was losing a step. Derrick Henry, what did he do? Rushed for 2,000 yards when he went to Baltimore after he left here. You know what I mean? It showed you it wasn't him. It wasn't him. So you can get great players like that in your backfield, but if something's wrong in with them front five up front, good God, man, it doesn't make a difference.
I look at Ashton Genty this year. Yeah, I look at Ashton Genty as prime example of that. They drafted him, and it seems like that team wasn't ready for him, at least to produce at the level that he wants to right now. But to that point, guys, Jeremiyah Love. I mean, this team's MO is running back. From the beginning of time, it's like Derrick Henry, Chris Johnson, potentially Jeremiyah Love, of course, Earl Campbell. Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense.
White. Think about Low White, man.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Forrest Tucker 3632 says, what do y'all think about a guy like the Texas Tech linebacker, Jacob Rodriguez, in the draft? If you can move back, get more picks in the second, big time production, and good at the combine.
I'll be quick on this one. You can't take a linebacker that high. Robert Saleh, throughout his career, has made late round linebackers awesome. He's a linebacker savant. His system creates great linebackers. I'm not taking linebacker high enough to take a guy like Jacob Rodriguez. I just don't. I don't think it's that big of a need. I can't do it.
I'd take a linebacker if his name was Sonny Styles.
Right.
Not Jacob Rodriguez.
Like Jeremiyah Love. Like I would take Jeremiyah Love because he's so great. I'd take Sonny Styles because he's so great and special. But if I'm not taking one of those guys because they're so special, then I probably won't take a running back or a linebacker until day 3. The 5th round, something like that. Like there's just a big gap for me in where I want those guys. Great point, Brad.
Yeah. One more question here, or I guess more of a comment, and this pertains to not just the offensive line, but the idea between a exciting kind of non-premium position type of player versus an actual need. Samuel Roland Mills, 1472. Peter Skoronski was a big team need, and he's balling now.
Facts. That's what you want. You want to pull up. It's like when you're drafting people and you start looking at players that you grabbed that have really made a difference. They grabbed him with the 11th pick of the draft, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like he kicked the door in because I think Jeffrey was eating his lunch in the very beginning, but he started to get better. He started to get better to where now he's arguably your best offensive lineman and can be mentioned amongst those Pro Bowl types. You know what I mean? He is considered like an anchor. Get me another one of those opposite guard. Get me another one of those types, even at the center position. Now we're cooking with fire. You see what I'm saying? Now we're doing some things. Peter Skoronski should be, in my opinion, the poster boy for drafting and developing your players.
Tyler, do you have anything to add to Peter Skoronski? Tom?
I just got to say, Skoronski was a good pick, but they could have got Jackson Smith and Jigba. So it's like, this is the positional argument. Like, why take a guard at 11 when Steve Avila got taken at 34 that year by the Rams? And Steve Avila is a pretty good player. I mean, I'd rather have JSN and Avila as a combination. But so it could go. We mentioned the running back thing, Jeremiyah Love, but like you mentioned the backs, Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson's never made the playoffs. Saquon Barkley had to get let go as a free agent because it didn't work out in New York. Christian McCaffrey had to get traded before it worked. Like,
Kenneth Walker just won MVP of the Super Bowl, and he's on a different team now.
Yeah, it's like what's that TV show, The League or whatever? He says, it never works for anybody, but maybe it'll work for us. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that you could look at it, and every time something else comes up, I'm like, oh God, I'm like swayed both ways.
But that's the plight of the running back, man. On a car, and I've used this analogy a million times. Running backs are like tires. They get replaced most often. They're the only part of the vehicle that actually touches the ground, but it's also the most vital part because without tires, that car don't move at all.
You can't move.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll finish with this comment. Nash Russ says, Borgonzi said he will pick the best player still on the board. Duh. That is what a good GM does. So that, of course, yes, that Mike Borgonzi saying everything and nothing at all. Exactly. Also what a GM does. We wanted to thank you for joining us here in the Titan Squad show. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. Also, you could download right here, whether it be Apple Music, Spotify, all that stuff, wherever you get your podcasts as well. And join us live here in the Titan Squad show on YouTube twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays during the off season and Tuesdays and game day during the regular season, and be an everydayer to the Locked On Titans show there with Tyler Rowland. But for now, I'm Julian Minnesone. That's Tyler Rowland. That's Brad Hopkins. See you guys next time.